Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Beyond Hourly podcast, hosted by Omni Bridgeway, one of the world's most experienced disputes funders and judgment enforcement specialists. Our podcast focuses on advancements in legal services that drive economic value for law firms and the clients they serve. Episodes of this podcast can be found on our website, www.omnibridgeway.com, iTunes, Spotify, and other podcast networks. We welcome you to subscribe to the podcast and leave us reviews. I'm your host, Stephanie Southwick. I'm an investment manager based in Omni Bridgeway's San Francisco office. Prior to joining Omni, I was the managing partner at a business and IP litigation boutique in Silicon Valley. My role at Omni involves assessing litigation investment opportunities generally, and more specifically in the trade secret space, and working with VC-backed companies. Our guest today is Aravinda Seshadri, founder of Venturous Counsel, a mission-driven law firm representing diverse-led startups and VC firms. She joined Orrick, Harrington, and Sutcliffe after graduating from Stanford Law School, and then spent 8 years as a partner at Silicon Legal Strategy, serving as outside general counsel for startups and tech companies, and representing investors in venture financing. Aravinda, welcome to the Beyond Hourly podcast. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you about diversity in Silicon Valley, what you're doing at Venturous Counsel, and why you're doing it. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I thought this was such a great idea. Yeah, you're fantastic. Omni's fantastic. I'm just delighted to have a chance to spend some time with you and chat about my lovely firm that I'm so proud of.
Yeah, well, we are so excited to hear more about what you're doing and why you're doing it. But first, I want to back up a little bit and talk about your background, because I think it's always interesting to hear how people made it to where they are today. So we're really excited to talk to you today about Venturous Counsel and why you founded your own firm. But before we do that, we'd love to talk about your background a little bit. So I think it's always so interesting to hear how people arrived at where they are today. So back up a bit and tell us how you got into the practice of law.
Yeah, I'll go all the way back. I grew up in the Bay Area, actually. And then when I was in 5th grade, we moved to Salt Lake City, Utah, which was significant culture shock. And then I ran as far away as I could to NYU for undergrad. But then I came back to the Bay Area for law school at Stanford. While there, I summered at Orrick, as Stephanie mentioned. And I knew I wanted to work with startups. So I went there, and they had a great reputation. And they have a great reputation of representing these great startups. But I realized it's kind of hard at a large firm to do a good job for small startups in a lot of times, because there are these larger transactions that drive more value for the firm, like mergers and acquisitions or IPO transactions. And I would find myself involved in these really large, very lucrative transactions for the firm, but not really having a lot of time or resources or bandwidth to be able to do a good job for the small companies. So it would end up being a little bit, not as timely or not as thoughtful of a response to those clients. And I had a colleague who felt very similarly that, there's got to be a better way. So he started Silicon Legal Strategy with the premise of, what if we just only focus on early stage companies and investors in that space? Like, could that work? And I joined as maybe the 4th attorney there. And it absolutely can. They're like 50 people strong now and doing great, and I love them. And I was there for 8 years, and I was a partner for the last 5 years. And the reality is, I'd always cared about diversity and inclusion. I fundamentally believe that differences in representations are a function of difference in opportunity and resources, not in terms of skill. Like, I just think that that's true, and it bears out every time we invest in expanding opportunity. We see often very clear increases in representation and proportionality. So I'd always cared about that. I was like the president of the Asian Pacific Islander Law Students Association at Stanford, and Women of Color Action Network, and all of that stuff. And probably didn't focus as much about it when I was a junior associate learning all of the ropes. But when I was a partner at Silicon Legal, I cared a lot as well. And so, really push and hit the pavement, trying to get as many diverse candidates as we could. And it is a very diverse firm, even now, especially in the corporate space. And then I started thinking maybe, it's time to give back to some of these founders. And I started putting on free workshops and trainings on concepts like, how to understand dilution, or What are key terms and term sheets, or what is equity versus debt financing? Just whatever questions people might have that they may not be able to get as many answers to because they may not have the same networks and connections. And in doing so, I realized that there's a problem that a lot of boutique firms have in terms of we're relying primarily on word of mouth and referrals. But that means that it's kind of locked within one network or a few networks. And if you're not within those networks and you're not in the know, then you don't know about or have access to that resource. I believe it's the best resource for small companies. And so it kind of was upsetting to me that the people who most need this resource in a lot of ways don't have access to it. And it's not definitely not malicious or intentional, or even despite the best of intentions. If you have a small boutique law firm with a limited marketing spend and budget, you're just maybe not getting out there as much. Your name is not out there as much. And you also might prefer working with clients that are referred because they're more of a known quantity. But the function of that, like the end result of that, is that a lot of diverse-led businesses and funds are either working with a really large firm that's not optimized to work with small startups, or sometimes they're working with somebody who does not really know what they're doing and is not giving them the best advice. Diverse-led businesses have to face all these other issues as this is one thing I just don't think they should have to face. And so last year, about a year ago, I founded this firm, Venturous Counsel, and it's a mission-driven law firm. And the premise is really just to provide a means to ensure that diverse-led companies and funds have the right legal resource that they need. So a lot of, I guess you would say, the pro bono work that I do is just talking to people that I'm not the person that they would want representing them. I'm not the right fit. But I've been doing this work for 15 years now. So now I know a lot of the people who are better options for them. And I can kind of matchmake a little bit just as part of the firm's mission. And then obviously I also represent companies that plan to get investment that are usually in the tech space. And I've been through it on the investor side and company side so many times that I'm able to really carefully guide them in a very efficient and less mentally consuming, less time consuming way to achieve, to efficiently achieve their goals. And in that way, I'm hoping to make sure more of these companies are successful.
Okay, so many questions for you. First one, what is it about early stage companies and startups that's attractive to you or has always been attractive to you?
Yeah, I didn't even really know that much about them until I came to the Bay Area for law school. But there's something about starting something new and just being really excited about it and also being really flexible at the same time. Sometimes it's overboard. I have companies that pivot every other month, but a lot of times it's really just really smart people that care a lot about something. They could have a cushy, high-paying job at one of the, big tech companies in the area, but they're deciding to kind of risk their savings and their sanity a little bit and go on their own and build something new. Usually it's because they're I want to see this in the world. And that's just something that's really revitalizing to be a part of. And it feels so rewarding to have a helping hand in that.
Awesome. I agree. I think that, we can share with our audience here that we work together and that I represented several of your clients on the litigation.
You were my go-to on a lot of commercial litigation. I was like, Stephanie's got my back, guys.
Your clients your clients in those cases were, my favorite. It's so exciting to be part of their world and to just feel their energy and their mission, right? You're right. It's driven by passion, and it's a really exciting world to be part of, even as the lawyer. So, okay, when you talk about diversity and diversity-led businesses and funds, what do you mean by that?
You know what? And it's so funny because everybody slices it different, and my goal really is to find companies that have some diversity within their founding or e-team. And that can be literally a woman because there's so much disparity between the amount of women that get funded and men, even though the desire to do these sorts of things is the same, or maybe more sometimes. And it could be a person of color, it could be LGBTQ. And I don't try and make it too narrow and confined. What's actually equally or maybe more important is that the company itself has a commitment to prioritizing diversity within its organization in terms of hiring and even vendor selection. And that's something what I've seen over time is that if that's not there from the get-go, it's very hard to bring in later, even if the company sees that it's necessary. You might be able to see that in terms of some of the big tech companies that have faced issues with like a kind of a toxic culture, because it's really easy to not to care more about other things and not have a values statement and not have a mission statement. But the companies that do well and persist and are good places to work are ones that actually take the time and invest in that. So for me, it's largely, and I have definitely encountered diverse-led businesses and funds who are like, that's kind of not my priority right now. I'm just trying to make it in the streets. And I tell them that, okay, I understand. And, let me give you some other suggestions because that's not going to fit the mission of my firm, which is to try my best to help these businesses succeed so that, as tech becomes more and more powerful, it's kind of terrifying if it looks just like only one person and it's servicing the world. There's so much literature and studies on how it's harder to maintain a diverse workplace and environment, but those companies do better. Like they win, And so it takes more work, but you get more out of it and it's better for the world, I think. So that's me.
Yeah.
Waxing philosophical.
I'm just going to go ahead and throw in there that we at Omni are also interested in funding cases where the litigation team is diverse, led by a woman, led by a minority. We agree that you get better results that way. So are you still doing those workshops you were talking about?
I haven't done per se those workshops, but I've been involved in a lot of talks on mistakes founders make, or there's a platform for women in tech called Alpha. So I've done office hours, ask me anything type thing there. So I'm still trying to get the word out, but I definitely, once I started this law firm, I didn't think I had a lot of time on my hands. And then I was like, oh, I did apparently have more time on my hands before. So I've been focused a lot.
That's good news, right? That's good news. I said that's
good news. Yeah. And I mean, just setting things up and making sure things are running right and making sure my clients are getting the best. That's taking up a lot of time, but it's all going well. And I anticipate scaling that up. Honestly, I've already reached out and made connections with a lot of diversity organizations within the tech and VC community. And I'm going to roll out activities and talks and workshops soon.
Do you feel like there's a movement there? Do you see other firms or funds or businesses really focusing on diversity? And is that something that you're seeing out in the world in Silicon Valley, or something you'd like to see more of?
Well, so I think we're in a very interesting time right now because there is exponentially increasing awareness of the fact that different people, based on how they look, have very different experiences within the America that we all live in. And I do think it's become there's more focus on it. It's also kind of trendy sometimes, which can be annoying for people who've been working on this for years and years, even more so than me, I'm sure. But at the same time, I'm so I'm almost terrified because I feel hopeful that, people are kind of really in a short period of time coming to a really extreme awareness of the disparities in terms of opportunity, and that everything can be explained by that. You can literally only look at that and explain the differences between how people are living and their relative quality of life and their jobs and what they're paid and all of these things. And so I think it's becoming more of a hot topic, and I'm actually really gratified. And I've actually seen funds pop up that are we only fund women, or we're focusing exclusively on people of color or black founded companies. And
so I'd just like to add here for listeners who may be interested in exploring litigation funding, that at Omni, we want to fund cases led by diverse litigation teams, particularly when lead counsel is a woman or a person of color. And we want to fund cases for diverse-led companies.
I think that's great, actually. When I started my firm, a lot of attorneys who are, let's be honest, pretty risk-averse, they were like, are you crazy? You're going to say no to people who don't have diversity or don't prioritize it in the organization? How, as somebody who's starting a firm, how do you justify saying no to money coming in that's going to support your company?
I might have had that same thought.
Yeah, you may have been one of those people, for reals. So I was worried about it, but I felt good about it. And, I felt that it was the right thing to do. And when I started doing this work, what I found is that it drew people to me. People would think, oh, I know a lot of lawyers, but she's a woman of color, and I know another woman of color that's like focusing on representing those people. So it was kind of like there was more of a fit in terms of the clients, and there was more like I popped out a little bit more, I think, in people's minds in terms of who's going to be in a good position to really represent, and having lived the experience in some ways, those founders, and who cares about those issues. And so, will be aware of them for on behalf of the client. And I've never loved my clients more. Like, I feel so aligned with them, and I feel so good about the work I'm doing. I just give advice that I think is right. And, all my focus is on making sure that they succeed. And so it just takes a lot of crap out of the equation, like I'm not trying to beat my chest and brag about how amazing I am. And I don't have to do that, because that's not the point. The point is to make sure that the company succeeds and that more of these companies succeed. So, I think there's also in VC, there's this focus on, let's find the arbitrage, right? Let's find the situation where the system is not working efficiently, and let's get the benefit out of it. And diverse founders are absolutely one of those situations. So I can see it's like a bargain in a ways, like it's kind of, you could even call it exploitative. I don't think it is, because it's giving them the opportunity, but like they may not have the same people clamoring at their door as, a more typical startup with like all the pedigrees from all of the big universities. So they operate and they get things done, and those are the people that succeed. So, I'm excited to see that movement.
So what do you think that founders of diverse-led companies and diverse-led funds should be looking for in their outside general counsel?
That's such a good question. And it's something I really had to crystallize while I was setting up the firm, because I had to figure out what I was offering. And I come down to one of the most important factors is actually something that's a little intangible, which is, do I trust this person? Do I feel like this person has my back? Do I feel like they'll give me honest advice and practical advice, and not like CYA lawyerly, mostly useless advice, right? And they'll tell me the real talk. They'll use all of their market knowledge from having seen from being exposed to a microcosm of all of these deals and these situations and these people. Will they give me good advice? And that is different for every person. But I think it does help to have somebody who understands the challenges of, being underrepresented in your field and cares about your success more than just as a paycheck. So whoever you can find. And I also tell people, I'll get people who reach out to me all the time. They'll say, well, I have counsel I feel fine with now, but, and I'm like, no, dude, if you feel good about your legal counsel, that is rare. Like, that does not always happen. If you feel like they're a good value, they prioritize you, they give you good strategic advice, that is precious. And you don't want, I don't want you to cheat on them. I want you to stick with them and see how it goes. Usually, though, people are coming to me because they don't feel that with their legal counsel. And, you can get by. It's not, and definitely companies have done fine with that relationship. But in a situation where you're underrepresented and you kind of have a lot of decks stacked against you, I feel it's beneficial to have any advantage you can have. And I have seen what a boon it is to a company where they really trust their legal counsel and, feel like they're efficient and they're not overcharging, and there's just a sense of trust. And it means that this whole portion of the founder's brain that has been freaking out about legal stuff and not knowing about it and not wanting to learn about it, because honestly, what a waste of time for a founder to do that when there are people who are specialized in that. It's just quietly freaking out and not doing much useful. And when you find that really good partner who you trust and who has your best interests in mind, you can kind of just free up that whole portion of your brain and commit that to further improving your business and your product and your team and everything. And those people who are able to do that, find those trusted allies and advocates and free up their brain to do all of the work and not be distracted by all of the stuff that you really don't have the expertise to handle, or, you're probably even scared about the wrong things. You know what I mean? But freeing up that portion just really allows companies to achieve like full potential at the risk of sounding super cheesy. If you find that match, you protect that. That's like a valuable relationship.
Absolutely. So we recently spoke together at the National Venture Capital Association. We did a webinar on litigation funding for VCs and their portfolio companies. And during that webinar, you shared with the audience some of your thoughts on litigation funding for your clients in particular. And I'm wondering if you can just kind of touch on some of those areas. And you told a good story too. So you can share some of those thoughts in that story as well.
Absolutely. So I will be honest that I did not know much about litigation funding until Stephanie, you started at Omni. I was largely unaware. I think my exposure to it was like in The Good Fight or something like that on TV, some like TV lawyer drama. Anyway, which was like not factual at all, I think.
Which is not unusual for your world, right?
Right, because
like come to realize that a lot of people in your space do not know about litigation.
No idea, right? So I felt I was ignorant, but it was like I was in good company. I definitely remember once we had talked about, and you kind of explained the dynamics and the pros and cons, and like really just it felt like a David Goliath equalizer, it spoke to me in that way. And I was reminded of a situation where one of my clients had been in serious acquisition talks with a big tech company. And they'd given more and more confidential and proprietary information. It's under an NDA, but those are notoriously difficult to enforce. So you have to prove that that was the information that was used, that was misused or whatever. So they gave more and more information. Finally, the tech company cut off negotiations and soon started their own very competitive, very similar product.
Yeah,
so I'm pretty
very typical story here in Silicon Valley.
Right? And we were just like, yeah, it's super unfortunate because we were just like, well, you don't have the money to sue these people, and you're not like your investors are not. They're not in the business of investing in litigation. They're in the business of investing in companies and that's what they understand, and that's what they'll do. You don't have money, and you don't have a way to get money to fight this, so you just kind of have to take it. And it's not even. I don't even know, right? Like NDAs are hard to enforce. Who knows if we would have proven? But it would have felt good to have tried. Right. And it wouldn't, in the model that litigation funding that at least Omni Bridgeway presents, it doesn't cost the company anything other than, obviously litigation is somewhat of a distraction. But honestly, that would have been welcome compared to the demoralization of just sitting there with an unjust outcome and not being able to do anything about it. So yeah, I wish I had known. Yeah, I wish I had known that this existed at that time to at least to consider it. And, if we did it, even if we didn't win, we wouldn't have been out of pocket on that. And, we would have felt like we tried. So.
Yeah. And that's one of my big messages, right? To startups and VCs that may have portfolio companies with these issues, do the analysis.
Just look into it.
Go talk
to the arsenal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Explore it. And so if you decide not to, go fight for your intellectual property rights or whatever it may be, that's an affirmative, informed decision, not just doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, if our audience wants to contact you, how do they do that?
Email is the best. I'm at Aravinda, Aravinda, at venturouscounsel.com, VENTUROUS, counsel, COUNSEL.com. Or you can just look up that venturouscounsel.com online. I will also put in a very quick plug that the business has grown enough in 1 year that I'm ready to hire my first full-time associate.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So if you're a junior associate with experience with working with startups and investors in the startup space, and maybe you're kind of are sick of your big firm job, or otherwise just looking for a change or a different opportunity, please reach out. Yeah, I'd like to spread the net as wide as possible again and find somebody who shares this passion and can help me make more diverse companies successful.
Well, We wish you the best of luck with Venturous Counsel, and I have no doubt that you will succeed. And I've worked with you, so I know how amazing you are. And going back to the earlier conversation, how much you care about your clients. And I don't think we can say that for all lawyers. So it's been a real pleasure having you today, Aravinda. Thank you again for appearing on Omni Bridgeway's Beyond Hourly podcast and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you so much for having me. And, I can say the same about you, Stephanie. You're just one of those people that brings passion and care and excitement to whatever you do. And so, yeah, I'm delighted. I'm delighted we're still in touch and that I'm able to chat on your podcast and figure out ways we can work together too.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned at the outset, episodes of the Beyond Hourly podcast can be found on our website, www.omnibridgeway.com, iTunes, Spotify, and other podcast networks. We'll be back soon with another episode. Until then, I'd like to thank our audience for listening in and invite you to subscribe to the podcast and leave us reviews. Please feel free to follow up with me, Stephanie Southwick, at ssouthwick@omnibridgeway.com for any feedback, ideas, or insights you have on topics we should cover on the podcast. Thank you and be well.